I stood in my parents' mahogany-paneled study, staring at legal documents that would transfer ownership of my tech company to my younger sister, Madison. The words on the paper blurred as my father's voice echoed through the room. "You were just the builder, sweetheart. Madison understands business." The company I had coded from scratch in their garage, nurtured through sleepless nights, and grown to $200 million in value, now belonged to someone who could barely operate a smartphone. My hands trembled as I signed the papers, but my voice remained steady when I looked up at them. "Congratulations, Madison." Without another word, I pulled out my phone and stepped into the hallway. One call would change everything. 6 months earlier, I had been living in the converted garage behind my childhood home in Palo Alto, surrounded by servers humming day and night. The space reeked of coffee and determination as I worked 18-hour days perfecting my revolutionary cloud security software. Every line of code represented months of research, every algorithm a breakthrough that could protect millions of users from cyber threats. My parents, Robert and Patricia, had spent their careers as Boeing executives before retiring to their comfortable Silicon Valley life. They watched my progress with the kind of polite interest reserved for watching paint dry. "When are you going to get a real job, Bee?" my mother would ask over dinner, her tone suggesting genuine concern mixed with embarrassment. "This computer hobby is fine for now, but you need stability." Meanwhile, the revenue reports told a different story. My software licensing deals had generated over $50 million in the past year alone. Companies across America trusted my security protocols to protect their most sensitive data. But to my parents, it remained a hobby conducted in their backyard. Everything changed when Madison moved back home. At 28, she had just closed her third failed marketing startup, each venture lasting less than 18 months before burning through investor capital. She arrived with 2 suitcases and a story about needing family support during a transitional period. I welcomed her warmly, even cleared space in the garage so she could set up a small office area. The first red flag appeared 3 weeks later when I borrowed the family computer to print client contracts. A forgotten browser tab revealed an email draft from my father to someone named Harold Brennan at Morrison & Associates law firm. The subject line made my blood freeze. Succession planning discussion, protecting family assets. I scrolled through the conversation history with growing horror. My parents had been meeting with corporate lawyers for over 2 months, discussing how to ensure proper business leadership transition and protect the family's financial interests. The emails referenced detailed discussions about my company's structure, revenue streams, and growth projections, information I had never shared with them. The final email in the chain contained a sentence that shattered my trust completely. Madison's background in business development makes her the natural choice for executive leadership. B lacks the interpersonal skills necessary for scaling operations. They had been planning to take my company for months. Every encouraging word, every proud smile when I shared good news about new contracts or technical breakthroughs had been fake. They were studying my business like vultures circling wounded prey. That night, I confronted my parents in the living room where they were watching the evening news. "I found the emails about succession planning," I said quietly, placing printed copies on the coffee table between us. My father's face flushed red, but he maintained his composure. "B, we're just looking out for your best interests. You're brilliant with technology, but running a business requires different skills." "Oh, skills Madison has," I asked, unable to keep the sarcasm from my voice. "The same skills that bankrupted 3 startups." My mother leaned forward with her practiced, concerned expression. "Madison learned from those experiences. She understands what went wrong and how to avoid those mistakes. You've never managed employees or dealt with investors." "I've been managing contractors and dealing with venture capital firms for 2 years," I replied. "I've grown this company from 0 to $50 million in annual revenue." "But you did it alone," my father interrupted. Madison knows how to build teams, how to delegate, how to present to boards of directors. You're too focused on the technical details to see the bigger picture. The gaslighting was masterful. They were rewriting history in real time, transforming my accomplishments into evidence of inadequacy. According to their narrative, success proved I was unfit for success. I looked at Madison, who had been sitting silently in the corner chair. "What do you think about this?" She met my eyes for just a moment before looking away. "I think Mom and Dad have valid concerns about scaling the business properly." That was the moment I realized the betrayal went deeper than opportunistic parents. Madison was actively participating in the plan to steal my life's work. She had moved back home not because she needed support, but because they needed her physically present to execute their scheme. The financial reality made their motivation crystal clear. My parents had invested their entire retirement savings into Boeing stock 20 years earlier. The company's recent struggles had cut their portfolio value by nearly 60%. They were facing a retirement funded by Social Security and whatever equity remained in their Palo Alto home. My company represented their last chance at financial security, and they were willing to destroy their relationship with me to seize it. The next morning, I watched Madison leave the house dressed in business attire for what she claimed was a networking breakfast. Something about her demeanor felt wrong. Too confident, too purposeful for someone supposedly looking for employment opportunities. I waited until my parents left for their tennis game, then searched Madison's temporary office space in the garage. Hidden beneath a stack of magazines, I found a manila folder containing photocopies of my client contracts, development timelines, and financial projections. Notes in Madison's handwriting filled the margins. Q3 launch delayed, major client renewal risk, competitor pricing advantage. The folder also contained business cards from executives at TechShield, our biggest competitor in the cloud security space. TechShield had been trying to poach my clients for months, but lacked the technical innovation to compete effectively. They knew my algorithms were superior, but had never been able to reverse engineer the core functionality. Now they had someone feeding them inside information. I photographed everything before returning the folder to its hiding place. Then I spent the afternoon investigating TechShield's recent marketing materials and client presentations. The similarities were unmistakable. They were using my development roadmap to position their inferior product as coming soon features that would match my capabilities. Madison returned that evening carrying shopping bags from expensive boutiques in downtown Palo Alto. When I asked about her networking breakfast, she launched into an elaborate story about meeting with a startup accelerator program that was very interested in her background. "They said my experience with failed ventures actually makes me more valuable," she explained enthusiastically. "I know what doesn't work, which is just as important as knowing what does work." "What kind of companies does this accelerator work with?" I asked. "All kinds. Technology companies mostly. Software development, cybersecurity, that sort of thing." The lie was so casual, so well rehearsed, that I almost believed her despite the evidence in my hands. Madison had always been the charismatic sister, the one who could talk her way into or out of anything. Watching her manipulate me with practiced ease made me realize this betrayal had been planned for far longer than a few months. Over the next week, I began documenting everything. Madison's networking meetings happened 3 times per week, always during business hours when potential clients might be available for lunch presentations. She started using technical terminology she had never understood before, casually dropping phrases like end-to-end encryption and zero-trust architecture into dinner conversations. The most damning evidence came when I overheard a phone conversation between Madison and someone she called David about positioning the transition narrative. She was standing in the backyard, probably thinking the garage walls would muffle her voice. "Prevails too emotionally invested in the technical side," Madison said. "She can't see the forest for the trees. Investors want leadership that understands market dynamics, not just product development." The key is presenting it as a natural evolution, David replied, his voice barely audible through her phone speaker. She built something amazing, but scaling requires different expertise. That's not criticism, it's just business reality. Exactly. We're not taking anything away from her. We're adding value she can't provide herself. I realized David was probably David Chen from TechShield's business development team, the same David who had been calling my office for months, trying to schedule partnership discussions that I always declined. That night, I confronted Madison directly. "I know you've been meeting with TechShield," I said as she prepared for bed. Her face went pale, but she recovered quickly. "I don't know what you're talking about." I found the folder with my client information and TechShield business cards. Madison sat down heavily on her bed, the confident facade finally cracking. "B, it's not what you think. I'm trying to understand the industry better. Mom and Dad think I should learn about your business before." Before what? "Before they ask me to help you run it." The admission hung between us like a bomb waiting to explode. Madison wasn't just stealing information for competitors. She was preparing to take over my company entirely. "Help me run it," I repeated slowly, "or run it instead of me." Madison's silence answered the question. She looked genuinely uncomfortable for the first time since moving home, but not guilty. Uncomfortable like someone who had been caught in a necessary deception, not someone who felt remorse for betraying family. "B, you're incredible at building things," she said finally, "but you hate the business side. You hate dealing with investors, you hate marketing presentations, you hate managing people. Mom and Dad think I could handle that stuff, so you can focus on what you love." And what do you think? I think they're right. The next morning, my parents requested a family meeting. We gathered around the kitchen table where I had done homework as a child, where we had celebrated birthdays and holidays, where I had first shown them my early programming projects on my laptop. "We've been thinking about your future," my father began using his old Boeing executive tone. "The company has grown beyond what one person can manage effectively. Madison could take over the operational side," my mother added, "handle the day-to-day business decisions while you focus on product development." "Like a partnership?" I asked. "More like proper corporate structure," my father replied. "Madison as CEO, you as Chief Technology Officer." "What about ownership?" My parents exchanged glances. That would need to be restructured to reflect management responsibilities. I understood then that this was not a negotiation. It was a fait accompli disguised as a family discussion. They had already decided to steal my company. They were offering me the illusion of choice in how much dignity I could retain during the theft. The corporate restructuring moved forward with a frightening speed. My parents introduced me to Harold Brennan, their lawyer who specialized in family business transitions. Harold was a thin man in his 50s who spoke in carefully measured phrases designed to obscure rather than clarify. "The goal is creating sustainable leadership structure that protects everyone's interests," Harold explained during our first meeting. "B retains her technical role and receives appropriate compensation for her contributions, while Madison provides the business expertise necessary for continued growth." I asked to review all documentation before signing anything. Harold smiled condescendingly and handed me a stack of papers 3 inches thick. Of course, due diligence is always prudent. The legal language was deliberately complex, but the core structure was simple. Madison would own 60% of the company, my parents would own 30%, and I would retain 10% plus a salary as Chief Technology Officer. All major decisions would require board approval, and the board consisted of Madison, my parents, and Harold as chairman. "What about the intellectual property rights?" I asked. "The patents and proprietary algorithms?" "Those transfer with the corporate restructuring," Harold replied smoothly. "The company needs to own its core technology assets." "But I developed those algorithms before incorporating the company. They're my personal intellectual property." Harold's expression tightened slightly. The company invested significant resources in developing those technologies further. Any prior work was essentially a contribution to company assets. I realized they were trying to steal not just my business, but the actual technology I had created. Under their proposed structure, I would become an employee working with my own inventions. That evening, I called my own lawyer, Sarah Martinez, whom I had worked with on client contracts and patent filings. Sarah reviewed the proposed documents and immediately scheduled an emergency meeting. This is theft disguised as corporate reorganization, Sarah said bluntly. They're taking everything and leaving you with essentially nothing. But it's legal, right? Harold wouldn't risk his license on something fraudulent. The corporate transfer might be legal, but there are other issues. Sarah pulled out a thick folder. I've been investigating your family's financial situation based on the information you provided. There are some serious red flags. Sarah spread bank statements and transaction records across her desk. Do you remember your grandmother's trust fund? The one that was supposed to pay for your education and provide a nest egg for your future? Of course. Grandma Helen left me $150,000 when I died 5 years ago. Your parents were trustees of that fund until you turned 30. They were supposed to transfer control to you 2 years ago. My stomach dropped. They told me the money was still being managed by the bank, earning interest until I was ready to invest it properly. The money was withdrawn 18 months ago. 3 separate disbursements totaling $297,000, including accumulated interest. Sarah showed me the bank records. The withdrawal authorizations bore my signature, but I had never seen these documents before. The signature was close enough to pass casual inspection, but clearly forged under careful examination. Where did the money go? I traced the deposits. $60,000 to Madison's credit card company covering outstanding balances. $100,000 to a luxury car dealership for Madison's new BMW. The remaining $137,000 went into a joint account belonging to your parents. The betrayal cut deeper than losing my company. They had literally stolen my inheritance to fund Madison's lifestyle while I worked 18-hour days building something they planned to take away from me anyway. Oh, there's more, Sarah continued. The company financial records you gave me show irregular cash withdrawals over the past 6 months. Large amounts categorized as consulting fees and business development expenses. I authorized those payments. My parents said they were bringing in business advisors to help with scaling operations. Some of the money did go to Harold Brennan and other legitimate consultants, but a significant portion was redirected into personal accounts. Sarah showed me a detailed analysis of company expenditures. Over $400,000 had been withdrawn for questionable purposes, office renovation, that improved my parents' home office company vehicles, that my parents drove exclusively, and executive entertainment that funded family vacations to Napa Valley and Lake Tahoe. They've been systematically looting your company to fund their retirement lifestyle, Sarah explained. The corporate restructuring is just the final step in a long-term theft operation. Well, what can we do? The forgery of your signature on the trust fund documents is bank fraud, which is a federal crime. The misappropriation of company funds could be prosecuted as embezzlement, but stopping the corporate transfer would require proving they acted in bad faith, which is difficult when they're your parents and legal owners of the company. Wait, what do you mean legal owners? Sarah's expression grew grim. When you incorporated the business who signed the founding documents? I did, but my parents co-signed because I was under 25 and needed guarantors for the business loans. The incorporation papers list them as co-founders with equal ownership stakes. You never formalized your sole ownership of the company because you trusted them. The room spun around me. I had built a $200 million company while remaining legally powerless to control it. My parents had been positioned from the beginning to take everything I created. Is there anything I can do? Sarah smiled for the first time during our meeting. Actually, yes, but it requires understanding exactly what intellectual property rights you retain regardless of corporate ownership. Let me ask you this. Did you file any patents or trademarks in your personal name before incorporating the business? Yes, I have personal patents on all the core algorithms. I registered them through the University Technology Transfer Program before starting the company. Those patents can't be transferred without your explicit consent, regardless of what corporate documents say. The company has been licensing your technology, not owning it. For the first time in months, I felt a glimmer of hope. My family could steal my company, but they couldn't steal my life's work. The question was whether that distinction would matter when the legal documents were finalized. The formal handover took place on a Tuesday morning at my company headquarters in San Jose. I had spent 3 years transforming a dingy office park suite into a modern technology workplace complete with open-plan development areas, soundproof meeting rooms, and a server farm that hummed with constant activity. Madison arrived wearing a navy blue Armani suit that cost more than most people earned in a month. She was accompanied by 3 consultants from McKinsey & Company, each carrying leather portfolios and exuding the kind of confidence that comes from charging $500 per hour to reorganize other people's life work. I sat in what used to be my conference room, watching strangers take control of everything I had built. The McKinsey team leader, a woman named Jennifer Walsh, presented their preliminary assessment of company operations with clinical efficiency. We've identified several areas for immediate operational improvement. Jennifer announced, her voice echoing off walls I had personally painted during late-night work sessions. The current staffing model shows significant inefficiencies that can be addressed through strategic downsizing and geographic arbitrage. Madison nodded enthusiastically, though I could tell from her expression that she didn't understand half the business terminology being thrown around. She had spent the past week cramming MBA textbooks like a student preparing for finals, but 3 years of failed startups hadn't taught her how to actually run a technology company. "What specific changes are you recommending?" I asked, knowing I probably didn't want to hear the answer. Jennifer consulted her tablet with practiced precision. First, immediate reduction of development staff by approximately 40%. The current team of 15 engineers represents significant salary overhead that can be optimized through offshore partnerships. My heart sank as I thought about the people who would lose their jobs. These weren't just employees. They were friends and collaborators who had believed in my vision when the company was nothing but code and ambition. Sarah Kim had joined me straight from Stanford, turning down the offers from Google and Facebook to help build something meaningful. Marcus Thompson had left a secure position at Cisco because he wanted to work on cutting-edge security protocols. Which positions would be eliminated? I pressed. Junior developers, quality assurance testers, and redundant senior staff, Jennifer replied matter-of-factly. The remaining core team can focus on maintenance and minor improvements, while new features are developed by our offshore partners in Bangalore. Offshore partners who don't understand our technology architecture, I said quietly. Madison leaned forward, trying to project authority she didn't possess. I know change is difficult, but we need to run this like a real business, not a charity. Our priority is maximizing shareholder value. More shareholder value, I repeated. 6 months ago, you didn't know what a server was. 6 months ago, I wasn't responsible for $200 million in company value, Madison shot back. I've been studying the industry, talking to experts, learning what it takes to scale a technology business properly. The irony was bitter. Madison was destroying the company using advice from consultants who specialized in optimizing failing businesses, not growing successful ones. McKinsey made money by cutting costs, not by understanding what made innovation possible. Jennifer continued her presentation with ruthless efficiency. Phase 2 involves consolidating operations into a smaller facility and transitioning to a primarily virtual workforce. The current office lease represents unnecessary overhead that can be eliminated through modern remote work practices. I looked around the conference room where my team had celebrated every major milestone. The whiteboard still showed diagrams from our last product planning session. The coffee machine in the corner had sustained countless all-night coding marathons. This wasn't just office space. It was the physical embodiment of 3 years of shared dreams and collaborative effort. What about client relationships? I asked, our biggest accounts value having direct access to our development team. Client expectations will be managed through proper account management protocols, Jennifer replied. Direct technical contact creates unnecessary dependencies and prevents efficient resource allocation. In other words, you're going to hide the fact that you're firing everyone who actually understands the technology. Madison's face flushed with anger. B, I need you to support this transition, not sabotage it. We're trying to build something sustainable here. You're trying to strip mine something valuable and sell the pieces, I replied. There's a difference. The meeting continued for another 2 hours as the McKinsey team outlined their complete dismantling of everything I had created. By the end of the day, my company would exist only on paper, a corporate shell with no soul, no vision, and no capacity to deliver the technology that made it valuable. As the consultants packed up their presentations and Madison prepared for her first day as CEO, I realized this wasn't just corporate restructuring. It was systematic destruction disguised as professional management. They were killing my company while congratulating themselves on their business acumen. The worst part was watching Madison believe her own performance. She had convinced herself that she was saving the business from my technical incompetence, that her brief education in management theory made her qualified to lead a company she didn't understand. The consultants fed her ego while emptying her bank account, and she thanked them for the privilege. That evening, as I cleaned out my office, I found a handwritten note that Marcus Thompson had left on my desk months earlier. Thanks for building something worth believing in. This place feels like the future. Now the future was being sold to the lowest bidder by people who couldn't code a simple website. But as I folded the note and put it in my pocket, I realized something important. They could take my company, but they couldn't take the relationships I had built or the reputation I had earned. The technology was still mine, and the people who understood its value knew where to find me. The war wasn't over. It was just beginning. The official press release meeting took place in the company's main conference room, transformed into a media center with professional lighting and branded backdrops. Local tech journalists, industry analysts, and potential investors filled every seat while cameras captured what was supposed to be Madison's triumphant debut as a Silicon Valley CEO. I sat in the back row like a displaced spectator, watching my life's work being rewritten in real time. Madison had spent the previous evening rehearsing with a media consultant, practicing sound bites, and memorizing technical buzzwords she still didn't understand. Thank you all for joining us today, Madison began, her voice projecting newfound confidence. I'm excited to share our vision for the next phase of secure cloud technologies. The name itself was wrong. I had originally called the company Data Shield Solutions, but Madison's branding consultants insisted that Secure Cloud sounded more modern and marketable. They were rebranding my creation before they even understood what it did. 3 years ago, I saw an opportunity to revolutionize enterprise cybersecurity. Madison continued rewriting history with breathtaking audacity. Traditional security solutions were reactive, waiting for threats to emerge before responding. I envisioned a proactive system that could anticipate and prevent attacks before they began. A journalist from TechCrunch raised her hand. Can you walk us through the technical architecture that makes this possible? Madison's prepared smile flickered for just a moment before she launched into a memorized response filled with industry jargon. Our platform utilizes machine learning algorithms to analyze network traffic patterns and identify anomalous behavior that might indicate potential security breaches. We employ a zero-trust verification system combined with advanced encryption protocols to ensure comprehensive data protection. The words were technically accurate, but completely hollow. Madison was reciting definitions without understanding the underlying concepts, like a student who had memorized a foreign language dictionary without learning grammar or syntax. How does your threat detection differ from existing solutions offered by companies like CrowdStrike or SentinelOne? Asked another journalist. Madison's confidence wavered as she realized her prepared talking points didn't cover specific competitive comparisons. Well, our approach is more holistic, she said vaguely. We don't just detect threats. We prevent them through predictive modeling and behavioral analytics. I wanted to interrupt and explain that our actual competitive advantage lay in proprietary algorithms that could process encrypted data streams without compromising security protocols. But legally, I was no longer authorized to speak for the company I had created. The questions grew more technical, exposing the depth of Madison's ignorance. When asked about compliance with SOS 2 Type 2 standards, she stumbled through a response about maintaining the highest industry certifications. When pressed for specifics about data retention policies, she deflected with generic statements about customer privacy being our top priority. The most painful moment came when David Chen from Wired magazine asked about the company's founding story. What inspired you to enter the cybersecurity field? And how did you develop the technical expertise to build such sophisticated technology? Madison's eyes lit up as she launched into a fabricated narrative about her lifelong passion for computer science and her vision for making the internet safer for everyone. She described late nights, learning programming languages, and early mornings, researching security vulnerabilities, painting herself as a self-taught technical genius who had persevered through the male-dominated tech industry. I started coding when I was 12, Madison lied smoothly. My parents thought it was just a hobby, but I knew technology would shape the future. I spent my college years studying both computer science and business administration, preparing for the day when I could combine technical innovation with strategic leadership. The truth was that Madison had majored in communications at USC, barely passed her required math courses, and had never written a line of code in her life. But she delivered the fabricated biography with such conviction that even I almost believed her for a moment. Can you tell us about your co-founder? David continued. I understand there was another technical contributor to the early development process. Madison waved dismissively in my direction, her gesture calculated to minimize my significance. B was one of our talented early contributors during the initial development phase. She helped implement some of the basic functionality while I was focused on the strategic vision and business development side. We're grateful for her contributions to getting the company off the ground. The casual erasure of my identity was masterfully executed. In Madison's narrative, I became a helpful assistant who had done some coding work under her brilliant leadership. 3 years of innovation, countless sleepless nights debugging complex algorithms, and breakthrough solutions to previously unsolvable problems were reduced to basic functionality support. Is B still with the company? David asked. She's transitioning to other opportunities, Madison replied smoothly. Sometimes people who are great at building foundations aren't the right fit for scaling operations. We wish her all the best in her future endeavors. I felt like I was attending my own funeral, listening to someone else deliver a eulogy that bore no resemblance to my actual life. The journalists scribbled notes that would become the official record of Secure Cloud Technology's origin story, cementing Madison's fictional narrative in tech industry history. The final blow came during the closing remarks when Madison announced her upcoming media schedule. She had already booked feature interviews with Wired, TechCrunch, and Forbes for the following week, positioning herself as a rising star in the female entrepreneur movement. It's important for young women to see that technical leadership is possible, Madison said, her voice filled with practiced sincerity. I want to inspire the next generation of female founders to pursue their visions regardless of the obstacles they face. The irony was suffocating. Madison was using feminist empowerment rhetoric to justify stealing another woman's achievements. She would become a symbol of female success in technology by erasing the actual woman who had done the work. As the press conference concluded and journalists began packing their equipment, several people approached Madison with business cards and collaboration proposals. I watched her network effortlessly, charming potential partners with her polished presentation and confident demeanor. Nobody approached me. In the span of 90 minutes, I had been transformed from company founder to invisible footnote. The tech industry had already forgotten that I existed, ready to embrace Madison's more palatable version of entrepreneurial success. Walking to my car after the event, I overheard two journalists discussing the presentation. "She seems really sharp," one said. "Great story about overcoming challenges in a male-dominated industry." "Yeah, though I thought some of her technical answers seemed a little rehearsed," the other replied. "But that's probably just media training. Most founders struggle with the business communication side." They were already making excuses for Madison's obvious incompetence, wanting to believe in the inspiring narrative she had crafted. The tech industry loved stories about brilliant young women disrupting established industries. They were less interested in investigating whether those stories were actually true. The devastation began immediately after Madison's press conference. Within hours of the announcement, my email inbox filled with resignation letters from the development team. Sarah Kim sent hers, first followed quickly by Marcus Thompson and 3 junior developers who had been with the company since our startup days. Sarah's message was brief but heartbreaking. "B, I can't watch someone else take credit for our work while planning to destroy everything we built together. Thank you for giving me the chance to be part of something meaningful. I hope we can work together again someday." Marcus included a longer explanation that captured the team's collective frustration. "The McKinsey consultant spent 2 hours yesterday explaining how offshore development teams could optimize our engineering processes. They want to fire half our staff and outsource core development to people who have never seen our code base. This isn't cost reduction, it's technological suicide." But the devastating blow came from Jake Morrison, my co-founder and chief technology officer who had helped build the core architecture from the very beginning. Jake had been my closest collaborator, the person who understood both the technical vision and the business challenges we faced together. He asked to meet me for coffee at our old spot near the Stanford campus, a small cafe where we had planned the company's early strategy over countless lattes and shared pastries. Jake looked exhausted when he arrived, his usually optimistic demeanor replaced by obvious internal conflict. B, I need to tell you something that's going to hurt," he began, unable to meet my eyes. "Madison made me an offer yesterday." My stomach sank as I realized what was coming. "She's offering me a $200,000 retention bonus and doubling my current salary if I publicly support the leadership transition and stay as CTO under her management." Jake's base salary was already substantial, but doubling it would put him in the top 5% of technology executives in Silicon Valley. The retention bonus alone represented more money than many people earned in 4 years. "Jake, you helped create this technology," I said quietly. "You know Madison doesn't understand what we built." "I know," he replied, his voice barely above a whisper. "But Lisa and I just bought our first house. We have Emma's college fund to think about, and Lisa's pregnant again. The mortgage payments alone are killing us, and if the company fails under Madison's leadership..." I understood the impossible position Madison had created. Jake wasn't just choosing between loyalty and money, he was choosing between his principles and his family's financial security. Madison had structured the offer to make refusal seem irresponsible and selfish. "There's more," Jake continued, looking even more miserable. Madison said that if I don't accept the offer and publicly endorse her leadership, she'll make sure I never work in Silicon Valley again. She claims to have connections with major tech companies who trust her assessment of employee performance. The threat was probably empty. Madison's network consisted mainly of consultants and business school alumni, not technology hiring managers. But Jake couldn't afford to test her influence when his family's stability depended on his career prospects. She wants me to give an interview to TechCrunch explaining how excited I am about the company's new strategic direction under her leadership, Jake explained. I'm supposed to talk about her technical vision and business expertise. What are you going to do? Jake was quiet for a long moment, staring into his coffee cup as if it contained answers to impossible questions. I hate myself for this, but I'm going to accept her offer. I can't risk my family's future on principle when Madison holds all the cards. The betrayal hurt worse than my parents' scheming because Jake's decision was entirely rational. Madison had created a scenario where my closest ally had no choice but to become her public advocate. It was political manipulation at its most sophisticated level. I'm sorry, B, Jake said, finally looking up at me. You deserve better than this. You built something amazing, and watching Madison destroy it while taking credit is going to be torture. But I have responsibilities that go beyond just doing what's right. I reached across the table and took his hand. I understand. You have to protect your family. If there was any other way... There isn't, I said firmly. Madison made sure of that. Jake's interview with TechCrunch was published the following day, complete with quotes about Madison's visionary leadership and deep understanding of both technology and business strategy. Reading his carefully crafted endorsement felt like watching someone I loved being forced to lie under oath. The article included a photograph of Jake and Madison in the company conference room, both smiling professionally as they pointed at technical diagrams on the whiteboard. Madison was wearing another expensive suit while Jake looked uncomfortable, despite his diplomatic words about the company's bright future under new management. The tech industry press coverage uniformly praised the leadership transition as a smart business decision. Industry analysts commented on the wisdom of bringing in experienced business leadership to scale technical innovation. Several articles mentioned Madison's impressive background in startup management, apparently without investigating the actual results of her previous ventures. Within a week, the remaining development team had been reduced to 5 people, just enough to maintain basic system operations while Madison's offshore partners prepared to take over new feature development. The office felt like a ghost town with empty desks serving as monuments to the collaborative culture I had spent 3 years building. Madison seemed oblivious to the destruction she was causing. She spent her days in meetings with consultants and business development executives, planning expansion strategies that required technology capabilities the company no longer possessed. She talked enthusiastically about leveraging synergies and optimizing operational efficiency, while the actual product slowly degraded due to inadequate support staffing. The most painful part was watching Jake try to maintain professional relationships with people who knew he had been forced to choose between his integrity and his livelihood. Former colleagues treated him with polite distance, understanding his impossible position, but unable to forget his public endorsement of Madison's leadership. Madison celebrated each resignation as evidence of her decisive leadership style. We're building a lean, efficient organization focused on results rather than sentimental attachments, she told a business magazine reporter. Sometimes scaling requires making difficult personnel decisions. She framed the mass exodus as strategic downsizing rather than acknowledging that the company's most talented people were fleeing because they couldn't stomach watching her destroy their life's work. In Madison's narrative, she was saving the company from bloated inefficiency rather than driving away the expertise that made it valuable. Madison's determination to assert control over every aspect of the company led to her most catastrophic mistake, Despite warnings from the remaining engineering staff, she demanded administrative access to all development servers and code repositories, insisting that proper leadership required understanding every system the company operated. I can't make informed decisions about technical strategy without seeing the actual infrastructure, Madison announced during a staff meeting on Thursday morning. Too many technology companies fail because leadership doesn't understand their own products. Jake tried to explain the risks diplomatically. Madison, the development environment is extremely complex. Even experienced engineers need weeks of training before they can safely modify production systems. I'm not planning to modify anything, Madison replied impatiently. I just want to review the code structure and understand how everything fits together. How can I talk to investors about our technology stack if I've never actually seen it? Tom Bradley, our senior systems administrator, attempted a more direct approach. The repositories contain 3 years of development history across multiple integrated projects. One wrong command could corrupt months of work. Madison's expression hardened with the familiar stubbornness I remembered from childhood arguments. Are you suggesting I'm too incompetent to look at computer files without breaking them? I'm suggesting that complex systems require specialized knowledge to navigate safely, Tom replied carefully. Even reading the code repositories requires understanding our branching structure and version control protocols. Then explain them to me, Madison demanded. I have an MBA from USC and I've been studying software development for months. I think I can handle following some basic instructions. The training session was a disaster from the beginning. Madison approached the development tools with the same confidence she brought to business presentations, assuming that determination could substitute for technical expertise. She ignored Tom's careful explanations about commit histories and branch dependencies, focusing instead on superficial elements like file organization and naming conventions. This structure seems unnecessarily complicated, Madison observed, clicking through directory trees without understanding their relationships. Why are there so many different versions of the same files? Those aren't different versions, Tom explained patiently. Those are different branches for testing experimental features before integrating them into the main codebase. It looks like duplication to me. We should clean this up and make it more intuitive. Tom's face went pale. Madison, please don't reorganize anything without consulting the development team first. The file structure reflects complex dependencies that aren't obvious from casual inspection. But Madison was already exploring the administrative interface, clicking through menus and opening dialog boxes with dangerous enthusiasm. She had convinced herself that business intuition could decode technical complexity, that her fresh perspective would reveal inefficiencies invisible to people too close to the details. The catastrophe happened at 11:37 on Friday morning. Madison, attempting to streamline the file organization, accidentally triggered a repository merge that conflated multiple development branches into a corrupted master branch. 3 months of carefully compartmentalized work collapsed into an unusable tangle of conflicting code. The first sign of trouble came when the automated testing systems began generating thousands of error messages. Then customer support started receiving calls about service disruptions and login failures. Within minutes, it became clear that the primary application was completely non-functional. What's happening? Madison demanded as Tom frantically typed commands into multiple terminal windows, trying to assess the damage. You merged incompatible code branches, Tom replied, his voice tight with controlled panic. The experimental authentication system overwrote the production security protocols. Every customer database is currently inaccessible. How long will it take to fix? Tom stopped typing and turned to face Madison with the expression of someone delivering a terminal diagnosis. With our current staff, probably weeks, maybe longer. We'd need to rebuild the entire authentication system from backup copies, assuming the backups weren't corrupted in the merge. Madison's confidence evaporated as she realized the magnitude of her mistake. Can't we just undo whatever I did? Version control doesn't work that way. The merge operation can't be reversed without losing all the development work from the past 3 months. The customer complaints began immediately. SecureBank's IT director called within an hour demanding explanations for why his company's data had become inaccessible without warning. Other major clients followed with increasingly angry voicemails as their operations ground to a halt. Madison's response to the crisis revealed her complete incompetence under pressure. Instead of taking responsibility or coordinating recovery efforts, she screamed at the remaining development staff to fix it immediately while refusing to admit her role in causing the problem. "This is obviously a system design flaw," Madison announced to the emergency staff meeting. "Robust software shouldn't be vulnerable to simple user errors. We need to rebuild the architecture to prevent this kind of failure in the future." Tom's professional composure finally cracked. "Madison, robust software is vulnerable to administrative actions performed by people who don't understand what they're doing. No system can protect itself from deliberate sabotage, even accidental sabotage." "Are you saying this is my fault?" "I'm saying you corrupted 3 months of work despite multiple warnings not to modify anything without proper training." Madison turned to Jake, looking for support from her newly purchased ally. "Jake, tell them this isn't my fault. The system obviously has design flaws if it's this fragile." Jake stared at his laptop screen, unable to meet anyone's eyes. His retention bonus was contingent on publicly supporting Madison's leadership, but even he couldn't defend her destruction of the company's core product. "The system was stable until this morning," Jake said quietly. "We need to focus on recovery rather than assigning blame." By the end of the day, 2 more developers had resigned rather than attempt the impossible task of reconstructing months of corrupted work. The company was hemorrhaging talent, customers, and credibility, while Madison continued to insist that the crisis proved the need for better systems design rather than competent leadership. I watched the destruction from my marginalized position, knowing that I could restore the entire system from my personal backup repositories within hours. But legally, I was powerless to help. Madison owned the company, and she had made it clear that my input was neither wanted nor welcome. The irony was perfect. They had stolen my life's work only to destroy it through their own incompetence. But the satisfaction of being proven right was overwhelmed by grief for the technology and relationships being sacrificed to Madison's ego. The emergency meeting with SecureBank took place in their downtown San Francisco headquarters, 30 floors above the financial district, with panoramic views of the Bay Area tech corridor. David Chen, their chief information officer, had requested the meeting with language that barely concealed his fury about the service disruption. Madison spent the weekend preparing for the presentation with the same McKinsey consultants who had recommended firing half our development team. She practiced deflecting responsibility while positioning the technical failures as opportunities for strategic improvement. "Remember, you're not apologizing for system flaws," Jennifer Walsh coached during their rehearsal session. "You're demonstrating proactive leadership by addressing scalability challenges before they impact long-term growth." I was included in the meeting only because SecureBank's contract specifically required technical representation from company leadership. Madison reluctantly brought me along as a silent observer, making it clear that I was not authorized to speak unless directly asked specific questions. David Chen was a soft-spoken man in his 50s who had managed enterprise technology systems for 20 years. He understood both the business and technical sides of cybersecurity, which made him particularly dangerous for someone like Madison, who relied on buzzword manipulation rather than substance. "Let's start with the basics," David said as we settled into SecureBank's executive conference room. "Can you explain what caused Friday's service disruption and what you're doing to prevent similar failures?" Madison launched into her prepared presentation with practiced confidence. "David, what you experienced was actually a positive development in our ongoing platform optimization. We're transitioning to a more robust architecture that will provide superior reliability and performance. So the 12-hour service outage was intentional. The temporary disruption was an unfortunate side effect of our infrastructure improvements, but it demonstrates our commitment to proactive system enhancement rather than reactive problem solving. David's expression remained neutral, but I could see his patience wearing thin. Madison, our traders couldn't access critical financial data for an entire business day. We lost millions of dollars in trading opportunities because your infrastructure improvements made our systems non-functional. I understand your frustration, Madison replied, still following her consultant's script. But growing pains are inevitable when scaling enterprise technology. The temporary inconvenience will be offset by dramatically improved performance once the transition is complete. When will the transition be complete? Madison hesitated for just a moment before delivering another rehearsed response. Our development team is working around the clock to finalize the new architecture. We're targeting full restoration within the next 2 weeks. David turned to his technical team, 3 senior engineers who had been using our security systems for over 2 years. What do you think about this timeline? Honestly, replied Sandra Martinez, SecureBank's senior security architect, based on what we saw Friday, it looks like someone accidentally corrupted their entire production environment. Rebuilding that from scratch would take months, not weeks. Madison's composed facade began cracking under technical scrutiny. Our situation is more complex than it might appear from external observation. We're implementing advanced solutions that require sophisticated integration processes. Can you walk us through the technical specifics of these advanced solutions? David asked. For the next 20 minutes, I watched Madison stumble through the most embarrassing technical presentation I had ever witnessed. She confused basic networking protocols, misused fundamental security terminology, and provided nonsensical explanations for how our systems actually worked. When asked about data encryption standards, Madison confidently explained that we used military-grade algorithms without being able to specify which algorithms or why they were appropriate for financial data protection. When pressed for details about compliance with federal banking regulations, she deflected with vague promises about exceeding industry standards. The most damaging moment came when David asked about our disaster recovery procedures. If your primary systems fail, how quickly can you restore service from backup systems? Our backup systems are integrated with our primary infrastructure. Madison replied, apparently unaware that this statement made no technical sense. So, recovery is essentially instantaneous because everything is synchronized in real time. Sandra leaned forward with barely concealed disbelief. Are you saying you don't have separate backup systems, that your disaster recovery plan relies on the same infrastructure as your production environment? We use advanced redundancy protocols, Madison said desperately, clearly realizing she had said something wrong without understanding what. David finally turned to me. B, can you clarify the actual disaster recovery architecture? Madison shot me a warning look, but David's question was direct enough that I had to respond. We maintain separate backup repositories with independent infrastructure, I explained. Full recovery typically takes 2 to 4 hours, depending on the scope of data restoration required. So Madison's explanation about instantaneous recovery was incorrect. I looked at Madison, who was silently pleading with me not to contradict her public statements. Madison might have been referring to our automated failover systems, which handle minor disruptions without manual intervention. But major system restoration requires more time. David nodded thoughtfully before delivering the verdict I had been dreading. I need to be direct with you, Madison. SecureBank's board has serious concerns about continuing our relationship under current circumstances. What specific concerns? Madison asked, her voice finally betraying genuine panic. Frankly, we question whether your company has the technical leadership necessary to protect our data. Friday's outage was bad enough, but this meeting has raised even more serious doubts about your team's competence. David consulted his notes with surgical precision. You couldn't explain basic security protocols, you misrepresented your disaster recovery capabilities, and you seemed unfamiliar with fundamental aspects of the system we're paying you to maintain. I've been focused on strategic leadership rather than technical minutia, Madison protested. Shh. Strategic leadership in a technology company requires understanding the technology, David replied firmly. We're not comfortable entrusting $50 million in annual business to someone who can't answer basic questions about their own products. The meeting concluded with SecureBank placing our contract under review pending resolution of technical concerns and leadership questions. David was diplomatically professional, but the message was clear: they had lost confidence in the company's ability to deliver essential services. Walking back to the parking garage, Madison finally dropped her confident facade. Why didn't you help me in there? She demanded. You could have explained the technical details instead of making me look incompetent. I wasn't authorized to speak, I reminded her. You made it clear that I was only there to observe. But you knew I was struggling with the technical questions. You've spent months telling everyone that I don't understand business strategy and that you're the qualified leader. I assumed you had prepared for basic questions about the technology you're supposedly managing. Madison was quiet for several minutes as we drove back to the office. Finally, she asked the question that revealed everything. How much of our revenue comes from SecureBank? About 40%, I replied. What happens if we lose their contract? The company becomes financially unsustainable. You'd need to find replacement revenue of $50 million per year, which is impossible without a functional product to sell. Madison pulled into the company parking lot and sat staring at the building that housed what remained of my life's work. For the first time since the corporate takeover began, she seemed to understand the magnitude of her incompetence. "BA," she said quietly, "I think I might need your help." The emergency family meeting was called for Sunday evening at my parents' house, the same mahogany-paneled study where I had signed away my company just weeks earlier. Madison had spent the weekend in crisis mode, realizing that SecureBank's threatened contract cancellation could destroy the business before she had a chance to prove herself as CEO. My parents were waiting with their familiar expressions of parental authority, clearly expecting to manage another family conflict through careful manipulation and emotional pressure. They had positioned themselves as senior advisors to Madison's leadership, so her failures reflected poorly on their judgment as well. "EB, we need to have a serious conversation about family loyalty." My father began using his old Boeing executive tone. "Madison is facing some temporary challenges, and we expect you to step up and help her succeed." "What kind of help?" I asked, though I suspected I already knew the answer. "Technical assistance," my mother replied smoothly. "You understand the systems better than anyone else, and Madison needs support during this transitional period." "You mean the systems that I'm supposedly too emotionally attached to manage properly?" Madison looked genuinely desperate, her usual confidence replaced by obvious fear. "B, I know we've had our differences, but the company is in trouble. The service outage damaged our reputation, and SecureBank is threatening to cancel their contract. So you want me to fix the problems you created?" "I want you to help me understand what went wrong, so I can prevent it from happening again." My father leaned forward with his practiced, concerned expression. "This isn't about right or wrong, B. It's about protecting the family's financial interests. If the company fails under Madison's leadership, everyone loses." The irony was staggering. They had spent months convincing me that Madison was more qualified to run the business, and now they expected me to rescue her from the consequences of her own incompetence. "What exactly do you want me to do?" I asked. "Restore the systems to working condition and train Madison on proper operational procedures," my mother replied. "Act as Chief Technology Officer under her leadership until she's comfortable managing things independently." "And what do I get in return?" My parents exchanged glances before my father answered. The satisfaction of helping families succeed and protecting everyone's investment in the company. No equity restoration, no decision-making authority, just technical labor to fix Madison's mistakes. The ownership structure has already been finalized, my father said firmly, but we're prepared to discuss appropriate compensation for your consulting services. I realized they still didn't understand the depth of their problem. They thought this was a minor technical glitch that could be resolved with some temporary help, not a fundamental business crisis caused by systematic incompetence. Before we discuss my involvement, I'd like to understand the company's current financial situation, I said. What's the cash position? My parents looked uncomfortable, clearly hoping to avoid financial specifics. Madison answered reluctantly. We have enough operating capital to continue current operations for about 6 months. That doesn't answer my question. What's the actual cash balance? Around $300,000, Madison admitted. I felt like I had been punched in the stomach. When I left the company, our cash reserves exceeded $2 million. Where did the rest of the money go? Strategic investments and operational improvements, my father replied defensively. What strategic investments? My mother attempted to change the subject. The specific financial details aren't as important as developing a plan for moving forward. The financial details are the most important part, I insisted. You can't solve business problems without understanding what resources are available. Madison finally broke down and provided the devastating details. The McKinsey consultants had cost $400,000 in fees over the past month. The office renovation designed to project success to investors had consumed another $200,000. My parents had approved massive cash withdrawals for what they called executive compensation and business development expenses. How much executive compensation? I asked. Madison deserves appropriate payment for her leadership responsibilities, my father said evasively. How much? Madison looked like she wanted to disappear. $60,000 per month plus benefits. I did quick mental math and realized they were paying Madison more than $700,000 annually to destroy a company that had previously operated on careful budgets and minimal overhead. What about business development expenses? The silence stretched uncomfortably before my mother answered. We invested in some personal assets that project the right image for client relationships. What assets? Age, a luxury vehicle for Madison's client meetings, my father said defensively. Professional wardrobe appropriate for executive responsibilities. A corporate apartment in San Francisco for entertaining investors. They had spent company money on a BMW designer clothes and a downtown condo justifying personal luxuries as business expenses. The company I had built through careful financial management was being looted to fund my family's lifestyle inflation. So you've burned through almost $2 million in company cash to pay for Madison's salary consultants who don't understand our business and personal luxury purchases, I summarized. Those were necessary investments in scaling operations properly, my father protested. And now you want me to work for free to fix the problems those investments created. The room fell silent as my family realized their position was completely untenable. They had stolen my company, destroyed its operational capabilities, depleted its financial resources, and now expected me to donate my time to repair the damage they had caused. We're family, my mother said, finally falling back on emotional manipulation when financial logic failed. Family helps family, regardless of temporary disagreements. Family doesn't steal from family, I replied quietly. Family doesn't forge signatures on trust fund documents to cover gambling debts. My parents' faces went white. They thought I was unaware of their financial crimes, that their lawyers' careful structuring had concealed the fraud underlying their actions. I don't know what you think you discovered, my father said carefully, but everything we did was legal and properly documented. I pulled out copies of the bank records Sarah had obtained, showing the forged signatures and unauthorized withdrawals from my grandmother's trust fund. Harold might have advised you on corporate law, but he apparently forgot to mention that forging someone's signature on financial documents is bank fraud. Those signatures were authorized, my mother protested weakly. By whom I never signed these documents, and the handwriting analysis will prove it. The meeting degenerated into desperate arguments and tearful accusations as my family realized their schemes were unraveling. Madison begged me to help save the company my parents threatened to disown me if I didn't support family unity. And everyone blamed everyone else for the crisis they had created together. Finally, I stood up and walked toward the door. I hope you solve your problems, I said calmly, but I won't be participating in any more family businesses. As I reached my car, Madison ran after me, with tears streaming down her face. "B, please. I know I screwed up, but I can't fix this without your help." "You're right," I agreed. "You can't fix this, but that's not my problem anymore." Driving home, I realized that my family's desperation had revealed something important. They had put themselves in a position where they needed my cooperation to avoid complete financial disaster. For the first time since this ordeal began, they were more vulnerable than I was. The balance of power was about to shift dramatically. Monday morning arrived with a sense of finality that I had been anticipating for weeks. I drove to the office one last time to clean out my personal belongings and officially transfer any remaining responsibilities to Madison's skeletal staff. The building felt like a mausoleum with empty desks, serving as monuments to the collaborative culture that had been systematically destroyed. Madison was waiting in what used to be my office, surrounded by legal documents and looking more desperate than I had ever seen her. She had clearly spent the weekend researching our actual business situation, finally understanding the magnitude of her incompetence. "Well, B, before you leave, we need to discuss the intellectual property situation," Madison said, her voice tight with barely controlled panic. "Oh, what about it?" "Harold says the company owns all the technology and patents because you developed them while employed here." I sat down across from her, maintaining calm composure while she fidgeted with anxiety. "Harold is partially correct. The company does own the rights to use the technology under our current licensing agreements. So we can continue operating without any legal problems. You can continue operating as long as you comply with the terms of our licensing agreements." Madison's expression shifted from relief to confusion. "What licensing agreements?" I pulled out a folder containing documents that would change everything. "Madison, you've spent so much time focusing on corporate ownership that you never investigated the actual intellectual property structure." The documents I spread across the desk told a story that Harold had apparently never explained to my family. Every core algorithm, security protocol, and technological innovation belonged to me personally, not to the company. I had developed the foundational technology before incorporating the business filing patents under my own name through Stanford's technology transfer program. "The company has been licensing my technology since day one," I explained calmly. "All the patents, proprietary algorithms, and trade secrets remain my personal intellectual property." Madison's face went pale as she began to understand the implications. "But the corporate documents say the company owns all technology assets. The company owns the right to use my technology under renewable licensing agreements that I signed as an individual contractor. Those agreements are separate from corporate ownership and can't be transferred without my explicit consent." I showed her the patent registrations all filed in my name between 2 and 4 years ago, the core security algorithms that made our product unique, the encryption protocols that protected client data, the machine learning systems that detected threats. Everything belonged to me. "Harold never mentioned any licensing agreements," Madison said weakly. "Where Harold specializes in corporate law, not intellectual property. He probably assumed that employee-developed technology automatically belongs to the employer, which is true in most cases. But I wasn't an employee when I created this technology. I was an independent contractor, licensing my inventions to a company I later founded. The legal structure was ironclad and completely intentional. 3 years ago, Sarah had advised me to maintain personal ownership of my core innovations, specifically to protect against corporate disputes or hostile takeovers. I had followed her advice meticulously, creating a legal firewall between my intellectual property and any corporate entity. "So, what does this mean for the company?" Madison asked, though I could tell she already knew the answer. "It means the company owns nothing but an empty corporate shell," I replied matter-of-factly. "You have office equipment, a lease agreement, and some client contracts that you can't fulfill because you don't own the technology necessary to deliver the promised services." Madison frantically shuffled through the documents, looking for some clause or exception that would save her position. "There has to be some way to transfer the intellectual property rights." "There is. I could sell the patents to the company or extend the licensing agreements indefinitely, but those decisions belong to me as the intellectual property owner, not to corporate management." "What would it cost to purchase the patents outright?" I had been hoping she would ask that question. Based on current market valuations for similar technology portfolios, probably around $150 million. The company doesn't have $150 million. I know. Madison stared at the documents in stunned silence as the full scope of her powerlessness became clear. She had stolen a company that owned no technology, fired the people who understood how to use that technology, and depleted the financial resources necessary to license it legitimately. You can't just shut down the company," Madison said desperately. "We have contractual obligations to clients. There are legal liability issues if we can't deliver promised services." "You're absolutely right," I agreed. "But those are problems for corporate management to solve. I'm just the intellectual property owner." "What do you want?" For the first time in months, I smiled genuinely. "I want you to understand what you actually stole. You took a corporate structure with no intrinsic value while leaving me with all the assets that made it valuable." I stood up and started packing the last of my personal items. Family photos, awards from technology conferences, and a Stanford hoodie I wore during late-night coding sessions. Madison watched helplessly as I gathered the symbolic remnants of my previous life. "The licensing agreements expire at the end of this month," I mentioned casually as I folded the hoodie. "After that, the company will have no legal right to use any of my technology. You can't terminate our access without notice." "I'm giving you notice now. The agreements include 30-day cancellation clauses that I can invoke at any time for any reason." Madison's professional composure finally cracked completely. Please. I know I made mistakes, but destroying the company won't solve anything. Think about the employees who are still here, the clients who depend on our services." "I am thinking about them. That's why I'm starting my own company." The words hung in the air like a thunderclap. Madison stared at me with dawning horror as she realized I wasn't just withdrawing my support. I was launching a direct competitor. "You can't use our client list or employee contacts," Madison said frantically. "That would be corporate espionage." "I don't need your client list. The clients know how to reach me. And the employees who quit your company are free to seek employment wherever they choose." I picked up my box of personal belongings and headed for the door. Madison followed me desperately, her confident CEO persona completely abandoned. "What about family loyalty?" she pleaded. "What about everything Mom and Dad sacrificed to support your dreams?" I paused in the doorway and turned back to face her. "Madison, our parents didn't sacrifice anything to support my dreams. They invested in stealing them. There's a difference. If you destroy this company, you'll destroy their retirement security too." "I'm not destroying anything. I'm simply reclaiming what was always mine. The destruction was your choice when you decided to steal something you couldn't manage. As I walked to my car, I could hear Madison on the phone with Harold frantically demanding legal options for forcing me to continue licensing my technology. But we both knew the truth. There were no options. I held all the cards now, and I was finally ready to play them. That afternoon, I made the phone call that would change everything. Sarah had been waiting for this moment since we first discovered my family's betrayal, and she had prepared the legal framework for my counterattack with surgical precision. Tech Secure Solutions is officially incorporated, Sarah informed me. All intellectual property transfers are complete, and we're ready to begin operations immediately. The war was over. I had won before Madison even realized we were fighting. The phone call I made while standing in my parents' study had been to Sarah Martinez, and the conversation lasted exactly 37 seconds. It's time, I had said simply. Execute the contingency plan. By Tuesday morning, Tech Secure Solutions existed as a fully operational technology company with superior intellectual property, proven leadership, and immediate market credibility. The speed of the launch was possible only because Sarah and I had been planning this counterstrike for months, ever since I first suspected my family's intentions. The incorporation documents were filed yesterday, Sarah explained as we reviewed the legal framework. All your patents and intellectual property have been transferred to the new company, and we've established proper corporate governance to prevent hostile takeovers. Unlike my previous company, Tech Secure Solutions was structured to protect both innovation and ownership. I retained controlling interest while providing equity stakes for key employees. The board of directors consisted of technology industry veterans who understood both innovation and business strategy. What about staffing? I asked. Sarah smiled and handed me a stack of signed employment agreements. Sarah Kim starts Monday as Vice President of Engineering. Marcus Thompson is returning as Senior Development Lead. Tom Bradley will manage infrastructure as Chief Technology Officer. Jake Morrison has indicated he'd like to join once his retention agreement with Madison expires. Jake's coming back? He called me yesterday after hearing about Tech Secure Solutions through industry contacts. Apparently, Madison's retention agreement includes a 30-day non-compete clause, but after that, he's free to seek other opportunities. The most surprising development was the immediate client interest. David Chen from Secure Bank had contacted Sarah within hours of learning about the new company, requesting an emergency meeting to discuss transferring their security services. As David wants to meet Thursday morning, Sarah continued, he's bringing representatives from 4 other major financial institutions who are evaluating similar transitions. They're all leaving Madison's company. David has been quietly networking with other CIOs about their concerns regarding leadership competence and service reliability. Your family's technical failures and Madison's embarrassing performance have created serious confidence issues across the entire client base. The financial picture was equally encouraging. 3 venture capital firms had already expressed interest in providing Series A funding for Tech Secure Solutions. My reputation in the cybersecurity industry, combined with proven technology and immediate revenue opportunities, made the investment opportunity compelling. How much funding are we talking about? I asked. Potentially $50 to $75 million at a $150 million pre-money valuation. Much better terms than trying to purchase your own intellectual property from Madison's company. By Wednesday afternoon, Madison was calling me every few hours with increasingly desperate offers. The licensing agreements were set to expire in 3 weeks, and her lawyers had confirmed that she had no legal recourse to force their renewal. B, what would it take for you to extend the licensing agreements? Madison asked during her 4th call of the day. I'm not interested in licensing my technology to your company anymore. We could adjust the terms. Higher licensing fees, equity participation, whatever you think is fair. Madison, The fairness issue was resolved when you stole my company. Now you're experiencing the consequences of that decision. But the clients will sue us if we can't deliver promised services. Then you should have considered service delivery capabilities before firing all the engineers who understood the technology. Madison's final desperate gambit came Thursday morning when she arrived at Tech Secure Solutions' temporary office space, a small suite in downtown San Jose that felt more innovative and collaborative than the sterile corporate environment she had created. I'm prepared to offer you 50% ownership in secure cloud technologies if you'll continue licensing your intellectual property. I looked up from the client proposal I was reviewing with Sarah Kim and Marcus Thompson. 50% of what a company with no technology, no qualified staff, and no viable revenue stream. We still have the client contracts and business relationships. You mean the clients who are actively seeking alternative providers because they've lost confidence in your leadership. Madison looked around the bustling office space where former employees of her company were enthusiastically rebuilding the collaborative culture she had destroyed. The energy was palpable as people worked together on challenging technical problems instead of fighting bureaucratic obstacles. This isn't fair, Madison said finally. You're using inside information and personal relationships to steal our clients. I'm using public information and professional relationships to serve clients who need reliable cybersecurity services, I corrected. The fact that your company can't provide those services isn't my fault. Mom and Dad invested everything in secure cloud technologies. If it fails, they'll lose their retirement savings. For a moment, I felt a flicker of sympathy for the impossible position my parents had created for themselves. But then I remembered the forged signatures, the stolen trust fund money, and the months of systematic gaslighting designed to make me doubt my own capabilities. They invested everything in stealing my life's work, I replied firmly. They gambled that I would be too powerless or too family loyal to fight back. They were wrong on both counts. Madison left without another word, probably realizing that negotiation was pointless when she had nothing to offer and no leverage to compel concessions. That afternoon, SecureBank officially terminated their contract with Secure Cloud Technologies and signed a new agreement with Tech Secure Solutions. 3 other major clients followed within days, representing over $70 million in annual revenue transferring to my new company. The tech industry press coverage was uniformly positive. TechCrunch published an article titled, "Cybersecurity Innovator Launches New Venture After Family Business Dispute," painting me as a victim of corporate politics who had successfully reclaimed control of her innovations. B.A. Chen's departure from Secure Cloud Technologies demonstrates the importance of proper intellectual property protection for technology founders. The article concluded, Tech Secure Solutions' immediate market success suggests that clients value technical competence over business school credentials when their data security is at stake. By Friday, Secure Cloud Technologies was in free fall. With no technology to license, no qualified staff to maintain existing systems, and no revenue to fund operations, Madison's company existed only on paper. The McKinsey consultants had disappeared once their invoices went unpaid, leaving Madison alone with problems she couldn't solve and responsibilities she couldn't fulfill. Jake called me that evening to discuss the timing of his transition to Tech Secure Solutions. Madison asked me to stay another month to help train replacement staff, but there's nobody left to train, he explained. Tom Bradley quit yesterday, and the last 2 developers gave notice this morning. What about your retention agreement? My lawyer says the non-compete clause becomes void if Secure Cloud Technologies ceases operations. At this point, that seems inevitable. I felt no satisfaction in Madison's failure, only relief that the ordeal was finally ending. My family had taught me that blood relationships meant nothing without trust and respect. They had chosen greed over love, and now they were experiencing the logical consequences of that choice. Tech Secure Solutions, meanwhile, was exceeding every metric we had established for success. We had rebuilt the team, retained the clients, improved the technology, and established a corporate culture based on merit rather than manipulation. Most importantly, I had learned that my worth wasn't determined by other people's recognition or approval. I had built something valuable once, and I could build it again, better, stronger, and completely on my own terms. The FBI agents arrived at my parents' house on a Thursday morning while Madison was desperately trying to negotiate emergency funding to keep secure cloud technologies operational. I learned about the raid from Sarah, who had been coordinating with federal investigators for weeks about the financial crimes underlying my family's corporate theft. "The wire fraud charges are ironclad," Sarah explained as we reviewed the criminal complaint. "Forging your signature on trust fund withdrawal documents crosses into federal jurisdiction because the transfers involved multiple states and financial institutions." The investigation had uncovered a pattern of financial manipulation that extended far beyond stealing my inheritance. My parents had systematically misappropriated company funds for personal use, categorizing luxury purchases as business expenses to avoid tax liability. The BMW, the designer wardrobe, the San Francisco condo. Everything had been purchased with company money that legally belonged to shareholders. "What about embezzlement charges?" I asked. "Those are more complex because your parents could argue they were authorized to make corporate expenditures as board members," Sarah replied, "but the scale of personal spending suggests criminal intent, especially combined with the forged bank documents." The federal complaint detailed transactions totaling over $800,000 in questionable expenditures. My parents had treated the company treasury as their personal checking account, funding a lifestyle they couldn't afford through systematic theft from the business I had built. Madison was named as a co-conspirator in the embezzlement charges, though her role was more complicated. She had benefited from the stolen funds without necessarily understanding their illegal origin. The expensive clothes, luxury car, and executive salary were all purchased with misappropriated money, but proving her knowledge of the fraud would require additional investigation. "The IRS is conducting a parallel civil investigation," Sarah continued. "The personal purchases made with company funds constitute unreported income for tax purposes. Your parents could face significant penalties and back taxes in addition to criminal sanctions." The financial reckoning was swift and merciless. Federal agents froze all assets that could be traced to fraudulent transactions, including my parents' home equity line of credit that had been secured using stolen company funds as collateral. Their comfortable retirement lifestyle evaporated overnight as investigators seized bank accounts, investment portfolios, and personal property purchased with embezzled money. Madison's BMW was towed from the Secure Cloud Technologies parking lot while she was inside meeting with bankruptcy attorneys. The San Francisco condo was padlocked by federal marshals, along with all the designer furniture purchased with company credit cards. Within a week, my family had lost everything they had stolen, plus most of their legitimate assets used to conceal the theft. The media coverage was devastating for their reputations. The Mercury News published a detailed investigative report titled "Tech Executive Family Charged in Embezzlement Scheme," complete with photographs of FBI agents carrying boxes of evidence from my parents' home. Robert and Patricia Chen, former Boeing executives, allegedly stole nearly $1 million from their daughter's cybersecurity company to fund luxury purchases and personal expenses, the article reported. Their younger daughter, Madison, served as CEO of the company while the alleged embezzlement occurred. The tech industry's response was swift and unforgiving. Madison became unemployable in Silicon Valley as news of the criminal charges spread through professional networks. No technology company would risk hiring someone associated with financial fraud, regardless of her actual culpability. Harold Brennan, the lawyer who had structured the corporate theft, faced professional discipline proceedings for failing to detect obvious financial crimes committed by his clients. The state bar investigation questioned whether Harold had deliberately ignored red flags about fraudulent transactions or simply been incompetent in his due diligence. Either way, his career is over, Sarah observed. Lawyers can't survive scandal involving client embezzlement, especially when federal prosecutors are involved. The most painful revelation came during the FBI's forensic accounting investigation. My parents had been systematically stealing from the company almost from the moment I incorporated the business. The theft wasn't a recent decision motivated by retirement desperation. It was a 3-year criminal enterprise designed to extract maximum value from my work while maintaining plausible deniability. They never intended for you to retain control of the company, Sarah explained after reviewing the evidence. The corporate structure was designed from the beginning to facilitate embezzlement. They were stealing from you before Madison even moved back home. The psychological impact was almost worse than the financial betrayal. My parents hadn't made impulsive decisions driven by temporary greed. They had planned a multi-year crime spree targeting their own daughter, systematically destroying family relationships to steal money they hadn't earned. Madison called me the day after the criminal charges were filed, sobbing uncontrollably as she tried to explain her role in the conspiracy. I swear I didn't know about the forged bank documents, she pleaded. Mom and Dad told me the company was generating enough cash flow to support executive salaries and business expenses. What about the trust fund money? They said Grandma Helen's inheritance was invested in company growth and that you would benefit from the increased business value. I thought it was legitimate family financial planning. I believed Madison's claims about not understanding the criminal nature of my parents' actions. She was greedy and incompetent, but probably not a federal criminal. The prosecutors apparently agreed, offering her a plea bargain that required cooperation with the ongoing investigation in exchange for reduced charges. What kind of cooperation? I asked Sarah. Detailed testimony about financial decisions made during her time as CEO, plus assistance recovering stolen assets that can be returned to tech-secure solutions. The plea negotiations revealed the full scope of my parents' desperation. They had burned through their legitimate retirement savings years earlier, funding Madison's failed startups and maintaining an expensive lifestyle they couldn't afford. Stealing from my company was their final attempt to avoid financial ruin, not their first venture into criminal behavior. The bank fraud charges alone carry 5 to 7 years in federal prison, Sarah informed me. Combined with embezzlement and tax evasion, your parents are looking at significant prison time plus full restitution requirements. For the first time since this ordeal began, I felt something approaching satisfaction. My family had destroyed their own lives through greed and criminal behavior. They would face serious consequences for their actions, and justice would finally be served. But the victory felt hollow. I had lost my parents and sister to their own moral failures, and no amount of legal vindication could repair those relationships. The money could be recovered, the company could be rebuilt, but my family was gone forever. The transformation of my personal narrative from family business failure to entrepreneurial triumph began with a single investigative article in Wired magazine. David Pogue, their senior technology reporter, had been following the Secure Cloud Technologies collapse and reached out to me for an exclusive interview about the intellectual property dispute. This isn't really a story about corporate restructuring, David explained during our first conversation. This is a story about systematic exploitation of a female founder by her own family members who couldn't build anything valuable themselves. The resulting article, published 3 weeks after the FBI raids, was titled "The Daughter Who Built an Empire and the Family Who Stole It." David had conducted extensive interviews with former employees, industry analysts, and legal experts to reconstruct the complete timeline of betrayal and recovery. Chen represents everything inspiring about Silicon Valley innovation. The article concluded. She built breakthrough technology through technical excellence and entrepreneurial vision. Her family's attempt to steal her achievements ultimately failed because you can't sustain innovation through theft and manipulation. The Wired article triggered a cascade of media attention that reframed my story as a symbol of female entrepreneurship overcoming systematic exploitation. Forbes published a profile titled How One Woman Reclaimed Her Stolen Company Through Legal Strategy and Technical Excellence. TechCrunch followed with an analysis piece about the importance of intellectual property protection for startup founders. The most powerful validation came from other female entrepreneurs who shared similar experiences of family or partner betrayal. Susan Chen, founder of a successful biotech company, wrote an opinion piece for the Wall Street Journal describing how her ex-husband had tried to claim credit for her scientific discoveries during their divorce proceedings. Bus B's story represents a pattern of exploitation that many female founders face. Susan wrote, family members and romantic partners often assume they can steal women's achievements because they underestimate our legal sophistication and business acumen. The tech industry's response was overwhelmingly supportive. Prominent venture capitalists publicly praised my handling of the crisis, emphasizing the importance of protecting innovation from predatory behavior. Reid Hoffman from Greylock Partners tweeted, BA Chen's recovery demonstrates why technical founders must maintain control of their intellectual property. Brilliant strategy and execution. Speaking invitations began arriving from major technology conferences. The organizers of TechCrunch Disrupt asked me to deliver a keynote address about protecting innovation from internal threats. Stanford Business School requested a case study presentation for their entrepreneurship program. My first major speaking engagement was at the Grace Hopper Celebration of Women in Computing, where I addressed 15,000 female technology professionals about family business ethics and intellectual property strategy. The audience response was electric as I described the systematic undermining I had faced and the legal framework that enabled my recovery. Some of you will face similar challenges, I told the audience. Family members, business partners, or investors who assume they can steal your work because they control traditional power structures. The key is preparing for that betrayal before it happens by maintaining ownership of your core innovations. The most meaningful moment came during the question and answer session when a young programmer from Seattle described her father's attempts to claim partnership in her software company despite contributing no technical work. How do I protect myself without destroying family relationships? She asked. You don't, I replied honestly. If your family is willing to steal from you, the relationship is already destroyed. Your job is protecting your future, not preserving relationships with people who don't respect your achievements. The industry recognition translated into tangible business success for tech-secure solutions. The media coverage attracted attention from enterprise clients who valued both technical excellence and ethical leadership. Several Fortune 500 companies specifically cited my reputation for integrity when explaining their decisions to switch cybersecurity providers. Venture capital interest intensified as investors realized they were funding not just a technology company, but a symbol of female entrepreneurial resilience. Our Series A funding round closed at $95 million with a pre-money valuation of $250 million, significantly exceeding my original company's worth. The valuation reflects both technical capabilities and market positioning, explained Jennifer Martinez from Sequoia Capital during the funding announcement. Tech Secure Solutions has superior technology, proven leadership, and a compelling brand story that resonates with enterprise clients. The most satisfying vindication came when Madison's former company officially filed for bankruptcy. Secure Cloud Technologies had struggled for months to deliver services without access to my intellectual property, hemorrhaging clients, and burning through remaining cash reserves. The bankruptcy filing made front-page news in the Silicon Valley Business Journal, complete with unflattering photographs of Madison leaving the courthouse after testifying about the company's financial collapse. The failure of secure cloud technologies demonstrates the difference between technical innovation and business school theory, wrote the journal's editorial board. Companies succeed by solving customer problems, not by manipulating corporate structures. Madison had become a cautionary tale in business school case studies about the importance of technical competence in technology leadership. Harvard Business School developed a curriculum module around the secure cloud collapse, emphasizing how management incompetence can destroy valuable assets within months. The irony wasn't lost on me that Madison's attempt to become a successful entrepreneur had instead made her a symbol of entrepreneurial failure, but I felt no satisfaction in her public humiliation, only sadness about the waste of potential and the unnecessary destruction of family relationships. My parents, meanwhile, had become invisible in Silicon Valley social circles. Their criminal convictions made them pariahs among former Boeing colleagues and Palo Alto neighbors who had once respected their corporate careers. They were facing federal prison sentences while watching their daughter achieve the kind of success they had tried to steal. The media narrative was clear innovation succeeded through merit, while theft failed through incompetence. I had become living proof that technical excellence combined with legal preparation could overcome systematic betrayal by trusted family members. But the most important validation came from my employees who had chosen to follow me through uncertainty, rather than accept comfortable mediocrity under Madison's leadership. We had rebuilt something better than what existed before, and we had done it together through shared commitment to both innovation and integrity. 6 months after launching Tech Secure Solutions, I was sitting in my new office in downtown San Francisco, looking out at the Bay Bridge while reflecting on how profoundly the betrayal had changed my understanding of myself and my capabilities. The crisis had forced me to develop skills and perspectives I never would have gained under normal circumstances. I never thought I'd say this, but Madison stealing my company was the best thing that ever happened to my career. I told Dr. Sarah Williams during one of our therapy sessions. Dr. Williams had been helping me process the emotional trauma of family betrayal while developing healthier relationship patterns for the future. "How has the experience changed your approach to business relationships?" she asked. "I used to assume that good intentions and hard work were enough," I replied. "I trusted people because I wanted to believe they were trustworthy, not because I had evidence of their reliability. Now I build relationships based on mutual respect and clear boundaries, rather than blind faith." The personal transformation went beyond business strategy to fundamental questions about identity and self-worth. For years, I had derived validation from my family's approval, measuring my success through their recognition of my achievements. The betrayal forced me to develop internal confidence, independent of external validation. The strangest part is that I'm actually more confident now than I was when everything seemed to be going well. I explained to Dr. Williams, when your worst fears about family betrayal actually happen and you survive it, you realize you're stronger than you thought possible. The practical skills I had developed during the crisis were invaluable for running a larger, more complex organization. Fighting my family's legal manipulation had taught me corporate law, financial forensics, and strategic planning at a level that most entrepreneurs never needed to master. Tech Secure Solutions reflected these hard-earned lessons in every aspect of its structure and culture. The employee equity program ensured that everyone who contributed to our success shared in the rewards. The corporate governance included multiple safeguards against hostile takeovers or insider manipulation. The intellectual property strategy protected innovation while enabling collaborative development. Most importantly, I had learned to identify and address toxic behavior before it could damage the organization. When one of our senior developers began undermining team collaboration through passive-aggressive comments and political maneuvering, I addressed the issue immediately rather than hoping it would resolve itself. "Your behavior is inconsistent with our collaborative culture," I told him during a direct performance conversation. "Either commit to supporting team success or find an organization that better matches your preferred working style." He chose to leave, and the team's productivity improved dramatically within weeks. The old Bay would have spent months trying to accommodate his destructive behavior out of misplaced loyalty or conflict avoidance. The most unexpected development was Jake Morrison's request to return to the company as Chief Technology Officer. His retention agreement with Madison had expired, and he approached me about rejoining the team he had helped create. "I know I betrayed you when I stayed with Madison," Jake said during our meeting at the same Palo Alto cafe where he had originally explained his impossible choice. "I chose financial security over personal integrity, and I've regretted it every day since." "You were protecting your family," I replied. "I understood your decision even when it hurt. But I want to prove that I learned something from the experience. I want to help build something based on trust rather than manipulation." I offered Jake a position with clear expectations about loyalty and communication. His return symbolized the team's commitment to rebuilding relationships based on mutual respect rather than financial pressure. The company culture we created attracted exceptional talent from across Silicon Valley. Engineers and product managers who had worked for large technology companies specifically sought us out because they wanted to be part of an organization that valued both innovation and integrity. "This feels like what Silicon Valley was supposed to be," commented Maria Rodriguez, a senior engineer who joined us after 8 years at Google. "We're solving important problems with brilliant people who actually care about each other's success." The financial success enabled me to establish the Helen Chen Foundation for Women in Technology, named after my grandmother, whose stolen inheritance had helped fund my family's criminal activities. The foundation provided scholarships and mentorship for young women pursuing careers in cybersecurity and software development. My grandmother believed in investing in education and future opportunities. I explained during the foundation's launch event, this program honors her memory by helping other young women achieve their potential without family interference. The foundation's first scholarship recipients included the Seattle programmer who had asked about protecting herself from family exploitation during my Grace Hopper presentation. She was developing breakthrough artificial intelligence security protocols while completing her computer science degree at the University of Washington. But the most meaningful transformation was internal. I had learned to trust my own judgment rather than seeking consensus from people who might not have my best interests at heart. I made decisions based on evidence and analysis rather than emotional manipulation or family pressure. I spent so many years trying to prove myself to people who were never going to respect my achievements. I reflected during another therapy session. Now I measure success by whether I'm proud of the work we're doing and the way we're treating people. Dr. Williams smiled and made a note in her file. That's a much healthier foundation for both business and personal relationships. The lawsuit against my parents was scheduled for trial in 6 months, but I had already achieved everything I wanted from the legal process. The criminal prosecutions had established accountability for their actions. The asset recovery had restored most of the stolen money, and the public record had vindicated my version of events. More importantly, I had built something better than what they had tried to steal. Tech-secure solutions was more valuable, more innovative, and more ethically grounded than secure cloud technologies had ever been. I had transformed their betrayal into my greatest professional triumph. The personal cost had been enormous. I had lost my parents and sister to their own greed and criminal behavior, but I had gained something more valuable, complete confidence in my ability to build meaningful relationships and successful organizations based on merit rather than manipulation. For the first time in my adult life, I was truly independent and genuinely happy. 18 months after that devastating day in my parents' study, I stood in the federal courthouse in San Jose as Judge Patricia Morrison delivered sentences in United States v. Robert Chen et al. My parents sat at the defendant's table in standard orange jumpsuits, their transformation from comfortable executives to convicted felons, complete and irreversible. Mr. Chen, you have been found guilty of wire fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy to commit financial crimes against your own daughter. Judge Morrison said, her voice carrying the weight of moral authority. Your actions represent a profound betrayal of family trust and a calculated theft of intellectual property you had no right to claim. My father received 18 months in federal prison, plus restitution of $1.2 million, covering stolen trust fund money, embezzled company funds, and interest penalties. My mother received 15 months plus identical restitution requirements. Both would serve their sentences at minimum security facilities, but the criminal convictions would follow them for the rest of their lives. Madison had accepted a plea bargain requiring cooperation with federal investigators and community service rather than prison time. She stood next to my parents, looking genuinely remorseful as Judge Morrison addressed her role in the conspiracy. Ms. Chen, while your culpability is less than your parents', you profited from stolen money and participated in systematic deception that damaged both your sister and legitimate business clients. Your cooperation with investigators demonstrates some recognition of wrongdoing, but cannot excuse the harm you caused. Madison's sentence included 2 years of supervised probation, 400 hours of community service, and lifetime prohibition from serving as an officer or director of any publicly traded company. She had also agreed to forfeit all assets purchased with embezzled funds, including her BMW and designer wardrobe. The restitution payments would fund Tech Secure Solutions' continued growth while providing symbolic justice for my family's crimes. But the money mattered less than the public acknowledgement that their actions constituted serious criminal behavior rather than family business disputes. After the sentencing, I met with Sarah Martinez to review the final legal documentation. All criminal proceedings are now complete, she confirmed. Your parents will begin serving their sentences next month, and all stolen assets have been recovered with interest. What about Madison? She's moving to Portland to work for a nonprofit organization that provides technology training for unemployed adults. Apparently, she wants to rebuild her life outside Silicon Valley, where her reputation isn't completely destroyed. I felt a mixture of sadness and relief hearing about Madison's plans. She was finally taking responsibility for her actions and trying to contribute something positive to society. It was probably the first honest work she had ever attempted. The federal convictions had made my parents pariahs in their former social circles. Former Boeing colleagues and Palo Alto neighbors avoided them, unwilling to associate with people who had stolen from their own daughter. Their comfortable retirement lifestyle was permanently destroyed, replaced by the stigma of federal criminal records. But my story had become something entirely different. Tech Secure Solutions had achieved a $400 million valuation during our Series B funding round, making it one of the most successful cybersecurity companies in Silicon Valley. We employed over 200 people across 3 offices and protected data for major corporations throughout North America. More importantly, we had built a corporate culture based on the values my family had violated: integrity, merit-based recognition, and collaborative success. Our employee retention rate exceeded 95% because people genuinely enjoyed working in an environment where their contributions were respected and properly compensated. The Helen Chen Foundation had awarded scholarships to 47 young women pursuing technology careers, with several recipients already making significant contributions to artificial intelligence and cybersecurity research. The foundation's mentorship program connected established female engineers with college students facing family pressure to abandon technical careers. My speaking engagements had evolved from describing personal betrayal to teaching strategic resilience for entrepreneurs facing systematic undermining. Stanford Business School invited me to teach a semester-long course about family business dynamics and intellectual property protection. The key lesson isn't about avoiding family businesses, I explained to my students during one lecture. The lesson is about maintaining ownership of your core value creation, regardless of corporate structure or family relationships. One student raised her hand with a question that captured the fundamental challenge. But how do you balance protecting yourself with maintaining family relationships? You don't balance them, I replied honestly. If your family is willing to steal from you, they've already destroyed the relationship. Your responsibility is protecting your future, not preserving connections with people who view your success as their opportunity. The personal transformation had been as significant as the professional vindication. I had learned to derive confidence from internal achievement rather than external validation. I measured success by whether our work improved cybersecurity for clients and created meaningful opportunities for employees. Dr. Williams and I had concluded our therapy session 6 months earlier when I demonstrated consistent emotional independence and healthy relationship patterns. You've developed the psychological tools to protect yourself from manipulation while building authentic connections with people who respect your boundaries, she had concluded. The most satisfying moment came during Tech Secure Solutions' 3rd anniversary celebration, when Jake Morrison, now our Chief Technology Officer, introduced me to speak about our company's mission and values. 3 years ago, B taught me that loyalty means supporting shared principles rather than protecting comfortable arrangements. Jake told our assembled employees and their families. She built this company twice, once through technical innovation and again through moral courage. We're all here because she refused to accept theft disguised as family loyalty. As I looked out at the crowd of brilliant engineers, innovative product managers, and dedicated support staff who had chosen to build something meaningful together, I realized that my family's betrayal had ultimately led to my greatest success. They had forced me to discover strength and independence I never knew I possessed. Sometimes the people who hurt us most deeply are the ones who force us to discover our true capabilities, I told the audience. Building something twice taught me that success isn't about what others give you. It's about what you create when they take everything away. The applause was thunderous, but more importantly, I saw recognition in the faces of people who understood both the cost and value of maintaining integrity under pressure. We had built something that would outlast any individual betrayal because it was founded on principles rather than personalities. As the celebration continued around me, I thought about my grandmother, Helen, whose stolen inheritance had inadvertently funded my family's criminal conspiracy. She had always believed that education and hard work would create opportunities for future generations. She would have been proud to see her legacy transformed into a foundation helping young women pursue their dreams despite family obstacles. The final vindication came in an unexpected form, a handwritten letter from Madison delivered through Sarah's law office 6 months after her sentencing. In careful script, she had written, "B, I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but I wanted you to know that watching you rebuild everything we tried to destroy taught me what real strength looks like. I spent years envying your achievements without understanding the work required to earn them. You succeeded because you never gave up on doing the right thing, even when it cost you everything. I hope someday I can build something worthwhile too, something that makes up for the damage I caused. I'm proud to be your sister, even though I lost the right to call myself that." I folded the letter carefully and placed it in my desk drawer. Madison was beginning to understand the difference between taking credit and earning respect, between inheriting success and building it through merit and integrity. Looking back on the entire ordeal, I realized that my family's betrayal had been a gift disguised as a catastrophe. They had forced me to develop capabilities I never would have needed in comfortable circumstances. They had taught me that real security comes from personal competence rather than family approval. Most importantly, they had shown me that success built through theft and manipulation is ultimately unsustainable, while success earned through innovation and integrity becomes the foundation for even greater achievements. I had lost a family, but I had gained something more valuable: absolute confidence in my ability to build meaningful relationships in successful organizations based on merit rather than manipulation. That knowledge would sustain me through whatever challenges lay ahead. Have you ever experienced betrayal from someone you trusted completely? How did you find the strength to rebuild when people you loved tried to destroy what you had worked so hard to create? I'd love to hear your stories of overcoming family business conflicts or other forms of systematic undermining in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe for more true stories about entrepreneurship, family dynamics, and the complex relationships between success and loyalty. Share this video with anyone who might benefit from hearing about the importance of protecting your innovations and maintaining your integrity even when it costs you everything. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it helps you recognize your own strength and reminds you that sometimes losing everything is the first step toward building something better. Remember that your worth isn't determined by other people's recognition. It's determined by the value you create and the principles you maintain, even under the worst circumstances. Until next time, keep building. Keep innovating and never let anyone steal your dreams.